Happy Friday, everyone. This is going to be a session, fairly informal session, about how I use ChatGPT for writing. And the idea here is to start getting you to think of the way in which these tools can help in your workflows, be it if you're interested in writing online or writing for a blog, building your online presence, and also, of course, to help provide a framework for clarifying your own thinking and even using it in a work context with some, of course, very significant security implications, which I'll cover. The goal of this meeting is just to show the capabilities of the platform, some prompt engineering tips and tricks, and then we'll write an article, which may be a total disaster, but we'll see how things go. Okay, so I'm going to break this talk down into a few things. Firstly, what we're going to do is we're going to take a fairly technical article on large language models, and we're going to summarize it together, and we're going to convert it into a post that can be published on LinkedIn. We're going to work on summarizing an article. So how do we actually summarize an article? I'm going to talk through a technique that I use, which is known as progressive summarization. And then once we've summarized the article, we'll talk through how you distill the learnings in that article. We're going to talk about how you write an effective outline. Taking that outline, we'll talk about how we actually generate a draft using ChatGPT, and then how we use some of the capabilities of these models to improve that draft and get it ready for publication. Okay, so we'll talk about progressive summarization, we'll talk about distillation, we'll talk about writing an effective outline, we'll talk about the use of ChatGPT, and we'll talk about how we can use ChatGPT to review and rewrite your article. Okay, so this will also give you some hints on prompt engineering and how that works. So the article that we are going to be sharing is a relatively recent article. The article is about why open source LLMs will win. This is the article. It is by a writer called Varun Shenoy, and it's a very opinionated article, like most things are on the internet. And what the author is talking about here is why they believe that open source LLMs will become more popular and more effective than closed source LLMs like ChatGPT and so on. So what do we do when we try and figure out how to make sense of, this is maybe 1,000 words, 1,200 word article? The way that I do it is that I skim, okay, what is this article about? Then I read deeply, and then I highlight, saying that, okay, what are the key points that this article is talking about, right? Often, if you skim, you can get a pretty good idea whether this is actually worth reading deeply. You might skim it and realize that what the author is talking about is something that is very obvious, doesn't really add value, is not really building to your own knowledge, or maybe it's something that you disagree so violently that you just don't even want to bother spending more of your energy going into it. Now, if you do decide to read deeply, you go through and you highlight what really stands out, or like what are some of the core components here. I went through and I sort of just literally copied and pasted what are the main points of this article, right? So these are, in some cases, is just copied and pasted from the article. In other cases, I add my own sort of commentary to sort of better give some structure to what the author is saying. Okay, what do we do next? Okay, so now we want to summarize. You've copied a bunch of highlights, you've grouped them into logical groupings. So here, let's say that I want to figure out, summarize why the author thinks that open source models might be more effective. Okay, you could go to ChatGPT. I'm using the free version of ChatGPT. I'll also show you some capabilities of the paid version of ChatGPT and GPT-4. You can just give it a directive. I just pasted in the highlights from the article about why open source models may be more effective. We hit summarize, and there you go. You get maybe a reasonable summary here. So we can still see that this is a little bit too wordy. So we can do a progressive summarization here. Okay, so there you go. Now we are getting a little bit of a better summary. So this now has become a real TLDR, simplified explanation of what the author is saying here in a lot of complex jargon. You can give very, very clear instructions to ChatGPT saying what to do with each sentence, what type of language to use, and so on. Okay, and now we have a much more straightforward summary. So we can use that to improve our own understanding and build a better mental model of what it is that we want to do here. Now you've got the summary. Now you need to think of, okay, how do you actually distill this learning? Okay, so why is this topic of interest to you? What really stood out in the article, right? Why are you actually even bothering to read and summarize and so on? What is the crux of the article? Is there anything that you learned here? And then more importantly, do you agree or disagree about what the author is saying? How does that change your thinking on this topic? And then how does that relate to what you do in your day-to-day life? A lot of people, when they write, if you go on LinkedIn, you'll see a lot of people writing sort of cookie cutter articles. It might be summaries of something that they've seen online. Usually people just dump text into ChatGPT or something similar, and you just end up with very samey looking content, right? But you do want to use these tools. You do want to write effective content. You do want to summarize it. But the key thing here is you need to do it in a way that really showcases what you bring to this content, right? The world is going to drown in AI generated content. But the reason that people are interested or they might read what you have to write is because you are bringing your own personality, your own thinking, your own experience to this. Okay, so you know what topics you're interested in. You read an article, you grab the highlights, you summarize it. Once you've got the summary, now you have something that you can fit into your head, saying, okay, what is this article about? And you run it through this sort of model, saying, okay, what do I think about this? What did I learn? Do I agree or disagree? And actually just answering these questions, right, in itself will give you a pretty effective outline of what you want to write. So we have distilled the learning. Now we're going to say, how do I write an outline? So this is where the ChatGPT stuff really comes in. Okay, so what is the article about? Summarize the key points of the article. You can use your highlights, your distillation, outline your thoughts. Okay, what is it that you are what is your opinion, right? So this is the answers to these questions here. What is your opinion here? And then you finish with a one-line conclusion. Here's my outline. I think that LLMs are said to be the building blocks of future applications, and deciding what LLMs to use and to deploy is not straightforward. What is the article talking about? And then I just say that this approach might make sense. There's significant engineering challenges that are not mentioned, that it's not an easy task, fast evolving field. And okay, so this is going to be our conclusion. So this is the process that you have to go through. This is the work that you have to do before you start using things like ChatGPT and so on. I'm going to have a little digression here, and I'm going to show you an article that I wrote yesterday on LinkedIn and how I used that. I'll show you the exact workflow, and then we'll come back to this article and take it from there. Okay, this is the entire workflow that I went through, right? So I tell GPT that I'm writing a 250-word LinkedIn post about SpaceX. I tell it that I want to take the outline below and help generate a draft post. I give it the directive that the audience is software engineers and executives, and that the message is on the importance of consistency and execution to drive success. Okay, so this is the goal, right? This is the crux of the matter. This is what I want to convey through this article. I took the outline. It was a very simple sort of summarization of a news article that I read, and then I added a couple of my points here, right? Sustained record shows SpaceX's ability to deliver with and execute with discipline. What was once a rare event is now mundane. So this is the process chops at SpaceX. And then I added something personal, right? So the personal thing is that I'm currently reading Walter Isaacson's biography of Elon Musk. A lot of people are reading it. It's been all over the news. Elon Musk is a controversial figure, but there's a lot to admire still about the work that is done in SpaceX. And the key that we want to take away, what you want the reader to take away, is about going back to first principles, questioning assumptions, and then executing with discipline. Okay, I'll talk about this, how you structure these prompts when we go back. But what GPT did was it gave me a draft, 250 words. I was not particularly impressed with it, but I said, okay, let's build on this article. So you can then ask it, saying, okay, you can take this context that we have and add 5 takeaways for a software engineering leader to the end of the post, and you rewrite it to make it more concise and direct. It went in, it generated this. You can see that it rewrote it to make it a lot more concise and direct. And it added some takeaways which sort of follow on from the outline that is there. So here you can see what I'm doing is I'm going to make it, I'm asking it to make it more conversational, and I also give GPT hints on how I like to write, right? So when I write, I like to use the occasional pun, I like to use wordplay, I like to make things more interesting. And then you can see that GPT is evolving here, saying it's literally shooting for the stars, right? So it's taking my directive and changing the tone to make it more like how I speak or how I write. You need to be very, very directive. Think of ChatGPT as like a really dumb assistant. You need to give it very clear directions on what it is that you want to do. A mental model to think about when working with things like ChatGPT is to look at this window that you have like a Google document, okay? And there are 2 people working on that Google document. One is you have your idea, you have the outline, you are telling it what to do. And then you have your assistant, Mr. ChatGPT or Miss ChatGPT, who is the other person who's working with you on the same Google document. You're having a to and fro. You're on a Zoom call or you are sitting next to each other. You're having a to and fro, you're telling it what to do, and your assistant is going ahead and making those changes. So far, what we've done is now we have a draft. I'm not particularly happy with this draft, but we can still go ahead and we can still use GPT to improve the draft, okay? So here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell it, give me a criticism of this, of the work that has been done here, and help me improve this, right? So you can use ChatGPT not just to help take an outline, generate some content, but you can also use it to critique it, to take on the persona of the person that you're trying to publish this content for, get some feedback, and incorporate that feedback. I'm saying, assume you are a busy software executive with an interest in Elon Musk rockets and software engineering, right? You can ask it to do something, critique the post above, and give me 3 ways in which this post could be improved. Then rewrite the draft, taking the feedback into account, and also take into, consider the style that I use. I like using direct, authentic language. I like to minimize the number of adjectives, similes, metaphors, etc. This is GPT-4. It's a little bit better than GPT 3.5 at doing this kind of stuff. But you can see that it gave me some interesting feedback. Software executives are busy and appreciate straight to the point communication. It could have a clear connection between software engineering. Takeaways are useful. They should be tied back to SpaceX. You need to think of how you can make this more engaging. Okay. I took this. I didn't just copy and paste it and publish it on LinkedIn. What I did is I used another tool called Grammarly, and I took the draft from ChatGPT. So I rewrote it and added a little bit more of a personal touch because I knew it needed to be a little bit more engaging. So I added this line saying, SpaceX is launching every 4 days. That's more often than I've worked out. I pasted that back into ChatGPT and worked on again suggesting, asked it to give me suggestions on how to improve it, and so on and so forth. I'm showing you all this because I want you to understand that using this tool is not a one and done type deal. A lot of people say, okay, I want to write an email. It generates an email, you copy and paste. I receive a lot of these emails. When I see it, it's very obvious that they have just asked ChatGPT to summarize it and to build it, right? These tools are effective, they're useful, but you need to bring your own authentic self to it. Right. So when you are generating a draft using ChatGPT, you need to have a clear outline. You need to answer, when you generate that outline, you need to answer some of the questions that you had, right? When you are building the prompt to generate text from ChatGPT, you need to give it as much information as possible so that it can do its job. It usually breaks down into directives, and those directives are, what is a context? The context could be, hey, I'm writing a blog talking about Jeavio's capabilities in digital transformation, or I want to talk about product management practices that we share at Jeavio, and I want to position Jeavio as taking a product first approach or a design first approach to product development. Okay, so that is a context. You're sort of setting the ground for what it is that you want the tool to do. You need to tell it what the audience is. Okay, the audience really drives the output from the model. If the audience is for primary school children, then the output is going to be obviously quite different to saying that the audience is a very technical group of PhD students who are working on this particular topic, right? So that really can change the tone. ChatGPT is also quite sensitive to the channel. So you can say that this is for LinkedIn, this is for Instagram, this is for Twitter, and you'll actually see that the type of tone and the type of words and languages that it uses changes. It's quite sensitive, so keep that in mind. What is the length? That's kind of obvious. What is the goal? What it is that you want to achieve, right? So the goal could be, I just want to position myself as a thought leader in large language models. The goal is to, like, it could be quite similar to the context, right? And then finally, you take the outline that we have generated through progressive summarization, through answering those questions that we mentioned, and you paste it into ChatGPT. That will then generate a draft. You get your draft, and then you can go into a feedback loop saying, okay, take on the persona of the audience, right? As X, what else would be useful? Or critique the content that I've generated. You can ask it for suggestions. How would you improve the article? What is missing? Are there any logical gaps or logical leaps that the content is making? But if you're actually writing something that you view as being controversial, or if you're writing something that you want to drive engagement, you want to drive debate, right? You can also ask ChatGPT to take an oppositional view, saying, take on the view of somebody who disagrees with with what it is that you're trying to say in this article, and give me a few points from taking an opposite point of view, right? That in itself can give you a pretty good idea of what type of engagement that you might get. Or it might also allow you to go back to your outline and say, okay, let me cover some of these points that have come up in this oppositional view as well. So this basically is a iterative process, right? You go in, you say what it is that you're trying to do, you keep editing with it, and usually the draft that comes out of ChatGPT, I usually throw it away and I rewrite it. But now I rewrite it, I have a lot more of a framework that I can use to generate better content. Let's do this. We'll try and write our article on LLMs. We'll try and go through the steps, and we'll see where we end up. Obviously, it's not going to be a great output given the time, 5 minutes or so that we have, but let's try it. So we have our article, we have our outline. I'm going to copy this outline here. And then we'll try and give a nice directive to ChatGPT on how to write this article. So what is the context? Context is making a decision between closed and open source models. I've written about previously, and this builds on a body of work already published. Okay, so there is a context. Audience is we'll keep going. Channel is LinkedIn. Length is 250 words. Goal is okay. And then outline, we are going to copy your outline here. Save and submit. Let's see. So now it's generated a draft here, right? And because it knows that you're writing for LinkedIn, you can see that it has also generated a bunch of hashtags, right? So this really goes to show the importance of giving very clear directives to these models. It knows what you're writing for. It is using its corpus of data to know what type of stuff is published on LinkedIn. And it also does it. So one thing I'll note, right? This is a very typical ChatGPT output. In the ever-evolving landscape of AI, large language models emerging as the pivotal tools, blah, blah, blah. Every time I see this kind of sentences, it is super obvious that it has been written by a large language model, because normal people don't write like this, right? So you need to be very mindful of how this type of stuff is coming. So now we can give it a directive saying, make the language more, avoid adjectives, write like. So this is another directive that you can use. You can give it style guides, right? Write in the style of, for example, The Economist, right, which is a famous weekly newspaper that has a very specific style of writing. So there you go. So now instead of writing a bunch of word salad, the language has become a lot more direct. So now some of this stuff may not be totally accurate. So you might want to verify whether it's not just making stuff up, but still it's done a relatively decent job at writing a fairly direct and simple output. So we can now go through this whole process of working with your with ChatGPT to generate output that is in line with what it is that you want to publish. But I just want to reiterate as we come to a conclusion here that this tool is very good at taking outlines and generating summaries. But it is also very obvious when people haven't done the work to make the output their own. They haven't thought through and taken a critical eye at what this thing is generating, right? You need to use it basically as a partner, as a dumb assistant that is working with you. But at the end of the day, you are accountable and responsible for the output that comes out of it. And because so many of us are bombarded by output that comes from these tools, you often have to you have to be very mindful that if not today, then tomorrow or next month, people will start developing very strong intuitions for when you've written something and just blindly copied and pasted it from ChatGPT. So remember to bring your authentic self. Remember to keep in mind what it is that you want to convey through your writing online, and make sure that the output that you get out of these models is in line with what you want to do. Don't lose that authentic message that you want to convey, because that is the important thing, right? It is, people often struggle with saying, oh, I don't know how to write. I'm not very creative. I'm not very good at writing, and so on. That is where ChatGPT comes in, right? You're not starting from just an empty blank page, right? You have something that you want to convey. You can use techniques like progressive summarization, distillation, and going through that sort of questionnaire that we talked about to come up with something that you want to convey. And then you can use ChatGPT to bootstrap from that seed, from that idea that you want to convey, and try and build some content that is appropriate for an audience or a chat. I also want to add here that the free version of ChatGPT explicitly says that what you paste in can be used for training the model, right? So there's a thumbs up, thumbs down when you use ChatGPT. that stuff is it basically means that they will use it to train. They use RLHF to make the output a little bit better. So you must not, okay, you must not copy in customer information or work specific information if you're using the free version of ChatGPT. Does it add its own content sometimes? Yes, it does, right? It does hallucinate, but you can again give a directive saying only use the outline that I give you and generate a draft again, right? So you can definitely use a directive, but you have to verify what it has generated. You need to make sure that the logic, because sometimes it's not just making up content, it also can take logical leaps. So when it tries to generate a summary, you might find that the conclusion that it is stating isn't in line with your logic. Okay, so don't just check it for whether it is accurate or not. Also check the logic. Also check that what it is generating is in line with what you want to convey. So these models have an information cutoff, which is I don't know exactly the date, but it's definitely not new. So if you take the example of the SpaceX thing, I actually gave it the data that I wanted it to use. I said it has done whatever 67 launches in 2023. There has been no accidents since 2016, and a bunch of different things. So if you're asking it to summarize or generate some data, you need to give it that data in the window, right? If you ask it an open-ended question saying, how did the stock market do in July 2023? It'll come up with some BS because that's how it is trained to work. But you can actually, if you can actually give it like a table saying, here are the daily closing Sensex points or whatever for the last month. You can put it in the context window, and then you can say, what conclusion can you draw from this data that I've given you? Okay, do not trust it to take data from its own knowledge base and generate accurate results, because it'll come up with BS. Now, GPT-4 is a little bit better, but I would definitely urge caution. If you wanted to talk about facts, or if you wanted to talk about something specific, then give it the data that you wanted to summarize.